Good morning.
I'll introduce you first if that's okay. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Giorgio Tedde, who is a composer, Italian composer from Sardinia, who teaches both in Switzerland and in Italy. And a lot of his work is very much concerned with the relationship between genres and that kind of interaction. And I just want to give a little bit of background here, because I'm also going to introduce Chris Orton, who is our recorder tutor, because Giorgio and Chris had never actually met. And I emailed Chris about, I think, 2 months ago, just asking if you might know a student who might be willing to play here. And Chris Happett, who lives in Barcelona, actually happened to be in Manchester at the time and kindly offered. You've played this piece before, but you've never met. And so I'm just absolutely delighted that this conference has managed to bring the two of you together. So without any further ado, Giorgio.
Thank you, Chris. So, my lecture inquires about the relationship between performer and instrument. Instrument ergonomics as space for composing. So, the best performance succeeds by the best relationship between performer and instrument. This relationship could be considered as the key tool in research for composing music. An inquiry in this relationship should approach the factors of the playing process. The most important are the underlying ergonomics in the bodily implication of the playing action and the psychological aspects that should motivate the player to undertake new behaviors with the instrument. This paper reports a significant application of these assumptions in a piece for recorder whose result has overcome the best expectation in terms of popularity and interest in instrument pedagogy. The lecture will show the genesis of this piece, its ergonomics implications, and its potential for education in new and traditional techniques. I am very grateful to Chris Orton that will play live excerpts of some extracts of the piece and will delight us through its complete performance. The piece titled Austro, originally written in 1991 for auto recorder. I outline here the framework of the lecture performance. So there are the topics of my lecture, and I will talk for each of them a few minutes. Genesis of the composition. Austro is the south wind. The recorder is a wind instrument. I grew up on a very windy island of South Europe. Now we are here in an island of Middle Europe, and then you know the wind. And the wind always followed me during my learning tracks. My idea was to put in music my deep feelings I perceived while eavesdropping the music of the wind. Although the idea is trivial, the process of composing is not and deserves attention to its structured approach. I imagined the extra musical concept of the wind transmuted in different bodily performative gestures. Concretely, I have related them to the breathing process and to all the possible playing actions in order to produce any sound suggestions that conjure the call of the wind. I have identified two main fields of action referred respectively to the blowing of the wind, breathing and control of the mouth and tongue tension by invisible internal gestures, and to its modulating iridescent tones and noises, fingering and control of the recorder position through the arms by external visible gestures. The essential instrumental techniques are here resumed: internal, wind increasing, strong tempest, whirlwind, and externals. So, the latter description of the instrumental techniques related to extra musical topics gives an idea of the composite abundance of referred different gestures. A wise use of these aimed at a musical function could be possible only through the minimal use of other differentiated gestures. Only a minimum content of actions with a minimum differentiations related to one of the different techniques listed above could ease its perception and support its musical function in interaction with other relationship, association, opposition. My solution to this problem was structured in 2 steps. The first, reducing the possible actions to the following below and building for most of these actions a minimal process that progressively explore the range and possibilities. Tapping, gliding along the walls, circular function, vibrato, shooting pressure peaks, and increasing the pressure, decreasing the pressure, slow and steady motion. It's important holding the pressure in steady levels, low, middle, high. And there is something more to detail, but maybe I go to the second step, is combining these single actions where possible in a multi-layer system that exploits and enriches the results of the first step. And now Chris shows us some, for example, tapping isolated movements. Combine it with tremors. So we go to the next. Gliding along the walls, very simple, glissando. Combine it with tremolo. And we go to shooting pressure peaks. Increasing the pressure, crescendo, simple. Or combine it with double alternate tremolo. Decreasing the pressure, combine these trills and tremolos. The review of all these combined techniques shows how the principle of ease and progressivity lead to increasing complexity step by step. The only way to master this complexity lies in the whole mastering of minimal instrumental technical actions. Paradoxically, the most difficult episode is the first part, where the minimal techniques are totally naked and exposed. The piece is designed to produce a deep interaction between the player and the instrument, aimed at improving his technical possibilities through successive steps. So it is, I call it an ergonomic process aimed at achieving technical skills from the root of the word ergo nomos, the rule to make something. Starting from these compositional principles, the basic choice for the construction of the piece were not the notes, the harmonies, the melodic progressions, or other acoustical objects, but the gestures, the actions, and above all, the relationship of the player with the instrument, with all the constraints determined by the physicality of both. The ergonomic contribution to this choice consists in the fact that we choose the actions progressively combined in multi-level structures, of which we are sure of their separate performability. Their combination will therefore be possible and achievable only if its simple partial components are mastered with absolute ability. The success is that it is possible to achieve a technical, very complex results, starting from the mastery of simpler gestures and actions. The musical aspects and overcoming of the traditional concept of the record are monodic versus polyphonic, and articulation versus endless tones. I think we don't need love, except he will play all a little bit later. Austro was born from a banal extra musical idea and was written in a very simple dramaturgical form. In the first part, the basic elements are shown in elementary form. Later, these elements are combined in multi-level structures where the temporal density of the events, the dynamic of the sound, the complexity of the layers, and the general tension grow in an unimaginable way beyond the normally known limits of the instrument. The instrument normally intended is monodic, thus reveal unexpected polyphonic resources. By three main levels, obstinate bass pedal, middle range droning structures, high range impulsive whistles, and controlled multiphonics. The characteristics of this piece, which for the first time aim at musical purpose, are endless tones through circular breathing, endless tremolos and trills building polyphony, very wide control of the dynamics. The piece has been written in 1991, and later these topics have been developed. The value of this technical research has been recognized all over the world, so that Austro and Gesti of Perio have been mentioned as compositions that in the second half of the 19th century have most influenced the record technique. Something about pedagogical evidence of the texture. The pedagogical value of this piece lies in the study application that must be undertaken to achieve a good performance. The breakdown of the multi-level combined techniques into simpler items allows the design of a multitude of preparatory exercises. Through them, it's possible to learn the piece and at the same time to improve many basic aspects of the recorder techniques, such as finger speed, breath control, fine and continued finger movement, and more. The obvious and simple passages need the clearest performance, and therefore the smallest mistake is immediately highlighted. So it is very necessary to enhance the basic technique. Maybe you can show something about complexity grown of or some, for example, with the tremors, before the simplest and then the complex, for example, but maybe before only two fingers, then three fingers, and then all fingers.
Okay. And then you add other things? And then with the blowing.
For example, psychological and aesthetical consideration. All over the world, the recorders player community has found in Austria a target towards which aim for the personal ambition of instrumental and musical growing. The challenge of overcoming the limits of the instrument and of transforming it into a polyphonic instrument, something like a pipe organ, and of forwarding deep emotions to the listener was the motivation and the crucial psychological impulse that nudged many record players to face the undoubted difficulty of the piece. A very large number of performances, more than 1,000, several CD recorded in Europe, and a continued presence of this piece in the bachelor and master exams in many European musical universities and conservatories testify to the success of this research in music performance. Now there is a review of April in the Neue Musikzeitung in German, and maybe I look to these two phrases: an extremely sophisticated transcendental etude for the exploration of the enormous poetic and technical potential of the recorder. This is to discover poetic and technical potential, hypnotical, cycling, supernatural music inspired by the didgeridoo or the Australian Aborigine. I've not said this, but maybe you can find it. So now the performance of the whole piece by Chris Orson with many thanks. You stand or you stay?
I stay down.
Okay.
I mean, that was literally breathtaking.
Yes, it was.
Let's have some questions, either for George or even for Chris as well, and about some of the collaboration. Thoughts, questions? Yes, Anne?
I'm just interested in the notation and the degree of freedom that the performer has in relation to the degree of control that you have over the piece. And just a simple question, first of all, in the 1,000 performances, how long is the longest performance and how short is the shortest performance?
Between 8 and 12 minutes.
So it's a 50% difference.
So,
Yeah.
but it is very, not very freedom in this piece. You can see the score. It is this one. Maybe you can go into the group. It is all really strictly notated. All the position of the fingers are, and then the effect of the approximately effect of the resulting sound.
I mean, for example, Barry might put like 20 seconds at the end of the first line and 40 seconds at the end of it, but that is...
I think that maybe you have to ask him if it is better or with the time input, or I think that maybe the same player could play one time in 8 minutes, one time in 10 minutes. It is right. So
Yeah, very much so.
talking of the of the tiredness, of the day or the air.
There's definitely, I mean, with this piece, there's definitely a huge physicality involved in it, and having hay fever at 9:40 in the morning isn't the same as sort of a 7 o'clock concert on the December in a cold room. So it's sort of, those things do impact. It's one of the pieces, what I really like playing along with Barry as Gesti, that was mentioned earlier, is that it's this piece that no matter how many times you play it, there's always something you think, no, and there's always more to dig, and much music is like that, but with this piece it sort of just keeps on giving, and so I'll go away and think, that bit should have been longer, and that bit could have, but in the moment when you're kind of confined by your physicality in many respects, which is part of the challenge. I would say generally I play this around, that was a bit short actually, I thought, well I don't know, but generally it's about the 10-minute mark. But there are many factors, sometimes you do get tired, and you do sometimes, it's not a musical thought, but it's like, okay, we need to move on, or I'm not taking in enough air, but that's the physicality of just learning, as you were saying, to play your instrument. The main thing I find about this, again, is that generally it's about getting to that state of flow. And this is one of those pieces that absolutely creates a sense of flow. For me as a performer, that is.
On a technical level, is the whole thing circular?
There's one small little place at the beginning of the first page where there's just a comma, literally. So we take that moment, and then the rest of it is...
It creates a beautiful fragility about somehow the circular breathing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could make places where stop to breathe, but there's it's not just a sort of feat of wonder, which it is, but there's something about the quality of the tone which seems different.
Yeah.
I
would agree. I would say absolutely. In this piece, the circular breathing is not a gimmick. The circular breathing is not there to be a clever trick. It's there for and this is quite a nice space to play it in. I've played it in churches and so on. Also, there's a version with live electronics which I played, which is a whole different world. But again, it creates a carpet of sound, I guess. And I think that's the idea, that we're playing it acoustically in a space that's reverberant. It's just a sonic wash, I suppose, if that makes sense in a way.
And the whole is very determinant to the length of the piece.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. In church, it could normally last 12 minutes.
It can take longer.
But I found it very theatrical because some of the trilling seemed to affect the flaps in your cheeks. So it's a sort of tremulous.
Well, that was probably me doing vibrato.
Yes, and the visual.
Visible
It's
gestures.
like, yes.
I mean, the main thing, with the circular breathing, actually, I mean, sometimes it's more successful than others, but I mean, my principle is to actually make it silent. You don't want to hear people going all the time. That's never really nice.
Just observing.
Yeah, but that's the vibrato sound. But the aim is to try and get the circular breathing. That's not a sound that we want to hear. Well, in my opinion, it's not a sound we want to hear.
Yeah.
It should just be. I've done it frequently where I've stood in a church up there somewhere, which actually gives you a little bit of leeway space-wise.
Yeah.
But then the sound is more distant.
You can take some real breaths.
No, it's more acoustic.
Matteo.
Hi, I'm repeating myself as I asked before to Susanna. It's very interesting, like today we can have like before the music of Susanna and then your piece, which are completely different. And I'm actually very interested in the relationship between composers and the audience. And I think from what I heard before, like the focus on her own research was to find a sort of connection with the audience. And your focus was to find more a connection with the performer. And actually, I'm a flute player myself, so I recognize many of those extended techniques. But I was wondering whether, like, in this wide spectrum of extended techniques you are offering to the audience, if you avoid that your audience might get lost.
I think that the audience for this piece should be such as a meditative audience that I think that Susanna too is considered as target of her compositions. I wrote this piece always when I compose something. I think the audience and the character of the piece could be for children, for cool, dark public, or for well-dressed symphony public. In this case, it was for a contemporary music festival, and then I think that I thought to the public too, but more than all to the performer to obtain this result. I have to say that the first time was a disaster because the performer was not able to understand all the implication. Only 3 years later, a student of this player said, I want to show the piece. No, the teacher has made so bad, the people should worse. But after a time, he convinced me to listen to him, and he plays the right piece with all these nuances, all these expressions, and the piece is born 3 or 4 years later, after the first performance.
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, with a good performance like the one we have today, the audience might enjoy it even better. That's part of being
Right.
One question I had actually for both of you is, I don't know what it's like in Sardinia when you grew up, but I grew up in a generation in the UK when almost everyone actually played recorder, for a couple of years at least in primary school, and therefore we have a kind of relationship with it. And there was something about, I found it absolutely mesmerising actually, but it reminded me sometimes of when I would just like play about, and there was a sense of play, and I wondered for you as the composer, did you compose some of this on the recorder?
I am of your generation, and as child, I have no deep is for you.
Oh.
The recorder, but really I checked all the position and all the sound in my size, in my room, before to write, because I want to be really sure that it was performable. So I think that is why thinking about the flute, and I'm happy to have realized it.
It just seemed that when you were playing it as well, there was something very natural. I don't think you noticed as well, the whole physical presence. It was like it was all part of the piece. And is that something you as a performer think is important?
That's a big question. I'm more of the sort of frame of mind generally that I prefer performers to be. I don't like this kind of movement. I find it generally. So for me, that's just how I am, and I like things to be. But it's also from technique. As a teacher, I like to do. I'm lazy. I'm very lazy, so I like to do as little as possible for the most output. So So it wasn't it wasn't something I really thought about in this piece about being still or anything. But it's just what's the most efficient way of getting the sound for me, and that's essentially my approach to all music.
It just seemed both visually and in the way we heard it, very effective.
Right.
As a result, it was very important. And actually, like you, that moment when you actually stopped, I thought that was brilliant actually, because of course you've got some of the very bassoon sequence where it's literally 20 minutes of solo briefing, and after a while you get it. But I actually really liked that because that was surprising. We didn't know what was going to happen. It was a bit dangerous actually.
It's like the wind itself is invisible, but you only see its effect on other things.
Okay, we need to end.
I'm just too good. I mean, I play the flute as well, and I'm kind of at the moment I'm obsessed with breathing. And you said that you had hay fever. So what would happen if your nose was completely blocked?
If I was totally blocked, I'd probably play something else.
Yeah,
I wouldn't bother trying to do a dodgy. It's just, I mean, today for me, I mean, there was some moments where it just wasn't quite where I'm used to it being. But that's just me.
I felt for you, because it looked like I get this so much, which is where you don't have enough.
Exactly.
You've got too much.
You've got too much, yeah.
Yeah, and you can't get it out.
And that goes. But that's life.
Quick enough.
Yeah.
Catherine's actually commissioning a series of pieces which are all in one breath.
Right.
And so
We've got 100 now.
we've got that's amazing. But we have to bring this to a close. But it's just been an enormous privilege to both hear you talk and to perform.
I'm very grateful to you and to Chris.
Not at all. It was brilliant.